Boys and girls, I invite you now to go downstairs for your Sunday school time.
Yes.
So I'll read once again our Bible reading for today, which comes from Isaiah 2, 1 to 5. This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many people will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we might walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion. The word of the Lord will be from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." Peace on earth, the prophet foretells in the book of Isaiah, in a vision where God will judge between the nations and he will settle disputes for many people. Yet this week, tear gas is fired into a mob of protesters who broke through the security blockade surrounding the palace in Egypt. Peace on earth, we hear the angels proclaim in the story of the birth of Jesus. Yet 2.5 million children have died as a result of the war in the Congo. Some from bombs, knives, bullets. But the vast majority is they've died because of preventable or treatable diseases. Peace on earth swells the melodic and harmonious notes of the choir in the beautiful old church, lit and decorated for Christmas, as the screams of another young girl swells throughout the village as she is brutally raped. And she is only one of many who that will happen to today in South Kivu. Peace on earth, booms the thunderous voice of the preacher in our ears, as another, far quieter voice contemplates taking their own life because of the bullies, and they just can't see how they can go on. Peace on earth. We read the heavily italicized print on the newest Christmas card that comes to our house this week. And yet the block print in the newspaper this week tells us about the murder of 3 young, innocent children in Drummondville, Quebec. And so together, the sounds and the prophecies of peace on earth contrast with the actual reality of life here on earth. Because the words peace on earth in the biblical text insist on one reality, yet the muffled cries of men, women, and children caught in the horror and the atrocity of war insist on another story. And so the dissonance of these sounds in our ears becomes too much. And so it's tempting for us to say, this is never going to happen. In an era of consistent military conflict, of hyper-violence, to write off this prophetic announcement of peace as impossible. And although Isaiah, who wrote our story today, may not know about the wars that are being fought in our world today, and while he may not be familiar with the protests that are taking place, or understand exactly what cyberbullying is, or even know our latest headlines in our newspaper here in Niagara Falls, he did know what it meant to live without peace. Isaiah knew far too well the foreign nature of peace here on earth. He knew too well the pain and suffering of life here on earth. Because you see, the book of Isaiah is the story of Israel's conflict, of staying in this kind of demanding imperial palace that he had to stay in. In the first 12 chapters of Isaiah, it is commonly understood that Israel had succumbed to an Assyrian power, and they were living under Assyrian rule. Isaiah and his contemporaries lived in the midst of attack. They had to go over many difficult hardships. They lived in the midst of conspiracy, in times of trouble and stumbling forward. The Israelites lived under the consistent threat of Assyria. So Isaiah knew, he knew too well what it meant to live without peace. He knew too well the horror of war and the pain of losing one's identity. But Isaiah the prophet refuses to be held captive to what is happening presently. He refuses to be left hopeless by only what is seen. And so instead, Isaiah writes a poem in Isaiah 2:1-4. It's a poem that is lyrical. It is disruptive. It is defiant and elusive all at one time. Through his poetry, Isaiah, you see, can do things that are not normally permitted by logic and by reason. His poetry opens up the world that can only be experienced through our senses. His poetry enables his contemporaries and us as well to access the tension and the contradiction that is present in our world. His poetry proposes, it wonders, it conjures, it imagines what life could be like. And so today we too enter this poem. We enter this story. We enter the story of Isaiah, of the anticipation of the vision that he has that is rooted in the deeper resolve of Yahweh. Isaiah tells us about a time that is to come in which all of the nations will come to Jerusalem. Because in Jerusalem, that is where God is fully present. And there we learn Yahweh will be the arbitrator. He will be the judge. And he will judge, and there will no longer be the need for war or for violence. Because Yahweh will rule, and everyone will be safe. And the transformation that Isaiah talks about is incredible. And it is a positive vision. Because swords are turned into plowshares, and spears are turned into pruning hooks. So we know that the instruments that are usually used for war will become the instruments of harvest. That which is meant for death will be used for life. Isaiah tells his readers, and he tells us today, there will be an end to political and economic oppression. There will be an end to the continuous threat that dominates our lives. There will be an end to hateful thought and ideology. The nations we understand through Isaiah's vision will come to know peace. And not only will they know it, they will actually put it into practice. Isaiah announces, he proclaims to all that will listen about the establishment of peace among all of the nations. And the form of the poetry, the fact that it's a poem, expresses the longing for peace that Isaiah had and that we as people have. And this rhetorical power that the poem is able to conjure makes peace this graphic and compelling vision that everyone wants to take part in. So Isaiah's poem and poetry should not be left as prediction, as only something that might be able to happen. But rather it must be an affirmation for all of us that history will actually reach its goal. This is a promise to each one of us that God holds the future in his hands. And it's not a mythical vision of peace, one that we read and we just dream about. Rather, it is a vision of peace that invites each one of us to actually participate in God's reign here on earth. The poem, you see, must be left to linger in our collective imaginations. It is a sweep of words that so obviously contradicts life here on the ground, in Isaiah's time and in our current context. And so today I ask you, depart from only what you see at the moment. Depart from the realities of death and pain and hatred and intolerance. Instead, host this poem. Host the poem in your own life. Don't just enjoy the poem and think to yourself, I wonder what it would be like if this were true. Don't just marvel at the cozy comfortableness of Isaiah's vision, but read the words of Isaiah as a summons into action for our lives. And so now, with a kindling of hope ringing in our ears, through Isaiah's words, we enter this Advent season. The season where Christ came as a small baby in a manger. And by coming in that way, he subverts every single Jewish expectation for their Messiah. Because the Jewish people awaited a warrior king, one that would come and take over the world. Well, Jesus came and lie in the manger as a vulnerable baby. And the Jewish leaders waited for their Messiah to come to take over the oppressive Roman powers and the Roman government. And instead, Jesus led his life as non-violent. He preached love of enemy. God, you see, did not come as a warrior king, even though that was what was expected. Jesus came as a baby, vulnerable, with nowhere to lie his head. And God's power, we learn, is hidden in the vulnerability of a homeless baby. So Isaiah's poem is a poem that moves us toward Bethlehem, to a tiny little baby in a manger. But Isaiah's poetry will not allow us to stay there. Rather, this poem must break open in our daily lives through daily acts of peacemaking that we choose to participate in. Because as we read the entirety of the Bible, one of the central visions that we see is that all of creation will one day be one. That every single creature in creation will be one with one another. But the Bible isn't really romantic about this vision. It never assumes that peace will come easily, or that it will be natural, or that it will be an automatic thing that happens. Peace, we learn throughout the entirety of the Bible, is one that is enduring, that must be constantly hoped for and lived out. It is promised persistently, and it is hoped for always. And so our work, our living out of the vision, is a daily act of revolutionary peacemaking. In Hamilton, where I grew up, there's this man that I've come to know. His clothes are as worn as his smile, and there are scuff marks on his shoes as well as on his face. And his name is Jed. And Jed dances everywhere he goes. He dances up and down Main Street in Hamilton. And while this may seem strange, and perhaps you don't want to be known as the person who dances around Niagara region, it is amazing what this man is able to do by dancing everywhere. And how this small act of dancing is a revolutionary act of peacemaking. Because you see, it's pretty hard to be angry at someone when there's a middle-aged man bebopping down the street beside you. It's pretty difficult to be caught up in road rage when you look to your left and there's a man doing the foxtrot down Main Street in Hamilton. It's pretty hard to take yourself really seriously when the tango is being performed beside you. Peace, it seems, is a scandalous assertion that how life is not how it always has to be. Peace, you see, is a gift. It is a wonderful, marvelous gift given to us in the form of a baby who would one day die on the cross. But peace is also a daily task for each one of us. And while it may not be these large, huge, world-changing things that you participate in, each action that you perform that points towards the love and the peace that is through Christ is enough and necessary. So perhaps your daily act of peacemaking may be dancing wherever you go. It may be to not say what you might have said, to not retaliate when you've been provoked, to love even when someone is making it difficult to do so, to say, I am sorry, and to actually mean it, to offer forgiveness, to smile at someone when they seem to be having a bad day. And our acts of peacemaking, as small as they may seem, in a world that is shrouded in violence, is enough and more. And so today I invite you to think, what if this poem is true? What does that mean for me in my life? And in this Advent season, as we anticipate the coming King found in the manger, allow Isaiah's poem to break open in your daily living. Allow his words to offer you hope, to anticipate and to envision something that is grand and possible today. Allow this poem to confront your resignation that this is just how life is, and believe that peace is possible in our daily lives. Allow the poem to break open today for you before you leave this place. Host this poem in your life. Let's pray. God, we come to you now and we ask that you teach us how to host this poem, how to live as revolutionaries of peacemaking, how to do small acts of love and peace and justice that reflect your character and who you are. Help us to know what that looks like. Help us to envision how that could be. Help us to see what it looks like to be your peace here on earth. Help us to smile and to forgive and to love when that goes against every single nature that is within us. God, you can do this through us. We trust in your power. We trust in our vulnerability and the fact that you work through those that are weak and make them strong. Amen.